Welcome back. We have Greg Troughton, CEO of RESA, with us today. Thanks, Greg, for coming in.
Absolute pleasure to be here.
Terrific. Now, there's lots going on in the real estate industry. Tell me all about the new legislation. What's going on?
Yes, well, I'm pleased to say that Thursday of last week, I had the pleasure of wandering down to Parliament House and seeing the last little bit of legislation going through the House, and it's fair to say I think both the government and in particular the minister was happy. But I tell you what, I was even happier. This has been a long journey, and I'm very pleased to see it come out the other end in the way it has.
Excellent. So how is it going to affect us and our vendors and buyers?
Look, what it does two things, and I think we've been able to sort of walk the quagmire between making sure the consumers remain protected through the transaction and reducing some of the red tape that was introduced back in 2008. So it was a bit of a balance between the two, and I think back in 2008, and I don't think I'll upset anyone in saying this, the government of the day cooked it, cooked the processes and then cooked it again and then whacked it in the microwave for another 30 seconds. So I'm hoping we've missed out that last bit of heating up in the microwave. But the main thing is, throughout the process, is the transparency and whatnot is certainly enhanced, and that can only be a good thing for the consumer, both the seller and the buyer in South Australia. Absolutely.
It's good to to get all those things ticked. Do you think it's gone far enough, or do you think it's gone, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I think it has gone far enough, and I've got both my fingers crossed that we won't be finding ourselves back in Parliament in the next 5 to 7 years. I'm hoping it's only going to be 20 years down the track where we have to sort of update the legislation. It has been a long journey, so I'm probably talking about legislation fatigue there. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few years. Yeah,
that's good. I'm glad to see that we're all protected. That's great. Now, interest rates are at an amazing all-time low, 2.75%.
Yes.
How does that affect us in the real estate industry?
Generally, we get very excited early on.
Yes.
And it normally takes 2 to 3 months for it to sort of filter through into the marketplace, and that's what we find. I guess what I would say is, and I'll probably get phone calls from various banks after this, yes, interest rates are at an all-time low. Let's just use that terminology. But I just hope and pray that the banks actually start lending on that, because it's one thing to see the interest rates coming down, and great to see the ANZ and Bank SA and all the rest of it reducing by more. But unless they start filtering that money out into the marketplace, I might suggest to people that they might be a little bit risk adverse with their lending. I'll be shot down for that, but perception rules my world, so I'm entitled to say it.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's interesting you say that, because a CommSec report that came out said that South Australia has the weakest uptake in housing finance, or the trend is something like 25% down.
Yes.
Is that because the banks aren't lending, or is there some other reason, do you think?
Look, I think Adelaide and South Australia is naturally conservative, and we generally lag behind other states. But look, I would have to say that I think there is, if my perception is that there's some lending hardness to it. And look, I'm not advocating 1 minute that throw money around left, right and centre. The last thing we want is to get into that. But interest rates are low, but unless the money actually gets lent, it's to no one's benefit. Yeah.
So you think people are still going through and they're finding the properties, but they're just struggling to get those applications through?
I think this is a very strong element. I mean, I've had one of our members recently say to me that there were 4 different purchases that went through a property up north, and every single one of them got knocked back on finance. Now, look, there's always 5 sides to a story, but I find that extraordinary in this day and age.
Absolutely. The money's cheap, and there are more properties coming onto the market at the moment. Like, I think sort of across the board, most people are agreeing that we're starting to bounce back now. I think that we've probably seen the lows, and I think that's a general thing that we're bouncing back. You would agree with that?
I would agree on the basis that, look, we're coming off a very low base. So I don't want to say we're swinging from the chandeliers or anything like that, not back in the glory days. But we are heading in the right direction. And what we're finding is there's more people actually out there pulling money out of their pocket to buy, as opposed to what I call the tyre kickers, 3, 4, 6 months ago. So we're heading in the right direction, which is fantastic to see.
So we just probably need a few more properties on the market for those people who do want to get in and buy. It's great news that we're all paying less off our mortgages. We certainly both love that, but I think we probably need a little bit more consumer confidence and a few more properties on the market.
I think that's what it is. I think it comes down to consumer confidence, and one of the things that always fascinates me is, yes, we've got an election, a federal election
Yes.
coming up, and then in March of next year a state election. And people go into the Conservative box. And I've never understood it, because in Australia we have this wonderful thing called the rule of law, and when it comes to politics there might be a little bit of black and white, but really whoever gets in, it's shades of grey. So I don't know why people really go into... I really don't know why people go into that Conservative mode when there's election on, but it's a fact. The stats show it. So it's frustrating, but I'm sure we'll get there.
I guess they sort of hedge their bets. They're not sure which way they're going to jump.
That's right.
Speaking of the federal budget that was released this week, do you think that they've done enough to boost the market, or could they have gone a little bit harder?
I think they could have gone a lot harder.
Yeah.
I think the various commentators around the place, certainly from a property perspective, it was good to see the infrastructure spend, but I just think that people are struggling at the moment, whether that's building new homes and second-hand housing, as I call it, what we're into. I think they could have done a lot more in terms of incentives and grants, and I guess the government these days is shying away from that. But yeah, I actually think property was the poor cousin in the budget this year.
Yes, we do too. But never mind, let's hope for...
Next year maybe.
That's right, absolutely. Now, what's going on with auctions around the place?
Yeah, auctions, it's gone a little bit quiet of late. I'll blame the weather. That's what I'll say. It's been cold and wet. So, but I do know that there's a few more coming onto the marketplace. I normally say that there's 80 to 100 each weekend, generally speaking, because I can make those generalisations. It has been very quiet, but I'm hearing from members that it's about to bounce back into the norm. Clearance rates have been, around that 50-55%, so it's been quite good. I think for most of last year I was seeing them around 30%, so that's 1 in 3 selling. So it's good to see that sort of thing bouncing back.
Absolutely. I've noticed coming through the studio where I work that I think we've got a few coming up, so hopefully those clearance rates will maintain and improve and pick it up a little bit. So
fingers crossed.
Absolutely. Thanks, Greg. We'll come back to you in a sec. In the meantime, let's go and have a look at Going, Gone.